If the First World War had a devastating effect on Aldington, the Lawrence saga of 1950 to 1955 had an even more shattering impact on his life and reputation. The young Australian poet Alistair Kershaw, who became Aldington's part-time secretary in 1948, had proposed in 1949 that Aldington write a biography of T.E. Lawrence, Kershaw's personal hero. A full account of his effort to do so, the research and the writing of the biography from early 1950 through to April 1952, the legal and other challenges and delays that followed his submission of the manuscript to William Collins, lasting until the autumn of 1954, the publication of the book at the end of January 1955, and the furore which lasted for months afterwards, is presented in Fred Crawford's 1998 book, Richard Aldington and Lawrence of Arabia, A Cautionary Tale. Aldington amassed an enormous amount of material on Lawrence. On the 2nd of January 1951, he speculated to Kershaw on what it concealed. There is some unresolved mystery about him, which has many aspects, one of which I am sure is homosexuality. You will be staggered when you see my collection of his anti-heterosexual and pro-homosexual statements. It's a colossal subject to treat with competence, and most difficult to treat frankly without being or seeming hostile. 2 days later, he told Henry Williamson, "There is some mystery about his family, a skeleton somewhere." When, towards the end of that month, he began to unravel the mystery, he was at first reluctant to believe it. It was the well-hidden fact, although Lawrence himself had been made aware of it when still a child, that Lawrence and his brothers were illegitimate. Aldington would be publicly condemned for his lack of decency in revealing this fact while Lawrence's mother was still alive. However, for him, to attempt to tell the story of Lawrence while ignoring this situation is like putting on Hamlet without the king and queen, and above all, without the haunting ghost. He theorised, might not the main clue, though perhaps not the only one, to Lawrence's peculiar psychology lie in his relation to his parents, in his discovery of what they thought their sin and its irreparable wrong to him, as well as to the dissonance set up in him by the influence of such powerful and opposite dominant personalities. To support his argument, he paraphrased a letter from Lawrence to Charlotte Shaw, one of over 300 available for public inspection in the British Museum, but from which he was refused permission to quote. Fortunately for him, Denison Deasy, another young Australian and friend of Kershaw, who formed a friendship with Aldington, spent hours in the British Museum copying them out. However, he acknowledged that the fact must not be abused and dragged in to explain everything. He had his own remarkable gifts and was as powerfully influenced by his environment in some respects as he violently reacted from it in others. Furthermore, he expresses characteristic sympathy for yet another highly gifted man sacrificed to 19th century snobbery, hypocrisy, philistinism and respectability in a generation which was supposed to be in violent revolt against them, he above all. What concerned him much more was his discovery, as he delved further into his sources, that much of Lawrence's own account of his actions in Arabia between 1916 and 1918 was exaggerated, or even false. He realised that those who had formed and perpetuated the Lawrence legend had been almost entirely reliant on information furnished by Lawrence himself. Lowell Thomas, whose 1919 lecture film show With Allenby in Palestine and Lawrence in Arabia played to massive audiences around the world, and was followed by a book, With Lawrence in Arabia, in 1924. Robert Graves, whose Lawrence and the Arabs appeared in 1927. Basil Littlehart, whose 1934 book T.E. Lawrence in Arabia and After made a case for Lawrence having been one of the greatest military strategists of all time. And Vivian Richards, a pre-war friend of Lawrence, whose portrait of T.E. Lawrence was published in 1936. Studying the correspondence between Lawrence and both Graves and Littlehart, Aldington discovered the extent to which Lawrence had influenced the content of these writers' books, while requiring them both to publicly deny his involvement. He told Kershaw in the summer of 1951 what his own alternative sources were. Though I have used 7 pillars occasionally, I have avoided repeating Graves's mere paraphrase of Lawrence's narrative, and above all, Hart's incredibly pretentious military history, using as authorities the secret dispatches, the official war history, Wavell, Barrow, Bremond, Bray, Young, and any outside authority who is not merely parroting TEL. To this list he added in a further letter George Antonius, King Abdullah, Sir Ronald Stores, Colonel Robert Buxton, General Allenby, Captain Rosario Pisani, and Colonel Walter Stirling. With the help of the elderly Gustave Cohen, retired professor of medieval literature at the Sorbonne, he managed to gain access to official French documents of the period. Another source was a book that had questioned aspects of the Lawrence legend as far back as 1929, Sir Andrew Macphail's 3 Persons. Aldington's own book became, as he states in his introductory letter, a criticism of those writings which have fostered the Lawrence legend, an analysis of the career of Lawrence, the man of action, and of the establishment and growth of the Lawrence legend. Hence its title, Lawrence of Arabia, a Biographical Inquiry. Testing and disproving several of Lawrence's tales about his early life, accepted unquestioningly by his earlier biographers, Aldington concludes, "Of course it can and will be said that hitherto these exaggerations and untruths I am pinning on Lawrence are trifles. And so they are, though truth itself is not a trifle. But it so happens that they can be convincingly shown to be untrue, while in other cases one may be perfectly certain the tales are false without having complete evidence to prove it. But what are we to think of a man so self-centred, so, there is no other word for it, conceited, so avid of réclame at any price, that he would stoop to such trifling deceits? And if he would deceive in trifles, for the sake of a worthless astonishment and admiration, what guarantee is there that he did not do likewise in more important matters, where he cannot be so convincingly checked? And further, what is the value of a reputation which is based on a multitude of just such disprovable or suspect stories? Ultimately, one issue became a test case. Lawrence had told several correspondents, including his mother, Charlotte Shaw, and Littlehart, that Churchill had offered him the post of High Commissioner for Egypt, both when Lord Allenby had threatened resignation in 1922 and when he actually left the post in 1925. Churchill wrote in T.E. Lawrence by his Friends in 1937 that in 1921, when Lawrence left the colonial service, governorships and great commands were then at my disposal. Nothing availed. He had, he claimed, told Lawrence The greatest employments are open to you if you care to pursue your new career in the colonial service. As Aldington points out, this was several months before Allenby stated his intention to resign his post. Furthermore, Egypt came under the auspices of the Foreign Office, not the Colonial Office. To test Lawrence's veracity, Aldington had, through Browning and Colin Mann, then Public Relations Officer of the Conservative Party, queried the likelihood of the offer of this post to Lawrence, with Leo Amery, who had been Colonial Secretary in the Conservative government of 1924 to 1929, with Lord Lloyd, whose father had been appointed to succeed Allenby in 1925, and with Lawrence's friend Ronald Storrs, the author of the entry on Lawrence in the Dictionary of National Biography. The first two said that they had never heard of the offer and thought it extremely unlikely, while Storrs called it grotesquely improbable. Alexander Frary had also arranged for Lord John Hope, the Conservative politician, to put the question to Churchill, who had answered, in writing, that Lawrence's claim was unfounded. While gathering his evidence and writing the book, Aldington was in touch with Williamson, who had been a friend and admirer of Lawrence. Williamson and Lawrence had met only twice, and briefly, but their correspondence had spanned the 7 years from Lawrence's writing to praise Tarka the Otter in 1929 until his death in 1935. Williamson's behaviour towards Aldington during the Lawrence saga was duplicitous, and he would acknowledge this and apologise for it in 1956. Initially, he was of great help, undertaking the task of writing to the publishers of Who's Who to ascertain whether Lawrence himself was responsible for his 1920 entry, and sending Aldington copies of his own Lawrence correspondence. When he sensed that Aldington was sceptical about Lawrence's career, he told him, "Write your book as though you were writing of Cathy," Cather, Aldington's daughter. "We love T.E.L. as you love Cathy, and he is like a son to me. You have a noble subject. He won't let you down."